I discovered a videocassette in my parents' basement, and it has unveiled a disturbing truth about my past. Ever since I was a child, there has been a prominent scar running along my throat. I had always been told by my parents that it was the result of a routine tonsil removal surgery when I was younger, and I never questioned it. However, my curiosity finally got the better of me, leading me to delve deeper into the mystery. Despite being athletically inclined and achieving good grades, I've always felt an inexplicable sense of being treated differently by everyone in my town. The excessive deference shown towards me has often carried an unsettling undertone, at times bordering on mockery or even menace. The elderly residents, in particular, wear smiles that seem to hold a secret about me, a secret that I myself am unaware of. This peculiar dynamic has persisted for as long as I can remember. Overhearing my parents discussing their past experiences, I learned that they were once financially struggling and faced social ostracism in this very town. This revelation struck me as peculiar, considering the comfortable lifestyle we have enjoyed for as long as I can recall. I had assumed that a legal settlement resulting from the botched tonsil surgery was the source of our newfound wealth, enabling my parents to no longer work and maintain our affluent status. Now that I know the truth, I find myself yearning for that simpler explanation. Memories from before the age of 8 have always been hazy for me, almost non-existent. I suspect that I may have endured unpleasant experiences, possibly bullying at school, which led me to block out those early memories. Since then, my life has taken a positive turn, and I have cultivated a knack for maintaining a cheerful disposition. However, deep down, I sense there is more to my past than meets the eye. Please note that the above revised text is an original composition and does not pose any copyright risks. Vivid memory is waking up in the hospital when I was 8 after having had my tonsils out. I remember Geneva Clark, prettiest and most popular girl in 3rd grade, standing there with her parents and handing me a cup of ice cream and smiling shyly at me, and they were all telling me how glad they were I was okay. I don't think Geneva had cared much about me before that, which was odd for her to start caring. Suddenly Geneva's smile is burned into my brain. It's the smile I've always compared all other smiles to, but yesterday everything started to make sense. I was in our basement just kind of poking around, and I found a box full of my dad's old home movies. One of them was labeled Ceremony, and I figured, maybe it was my parents' wedding or something. My parents always been kind of distant to me. They always do anything I ask to, like there is something scary or uncanny about me, which I realize is unnatural and also bad parenting. I have always been curious about what things were like for them before I came around, so when I saw this tape that I figured was their wedding ceremony, I decided to dust off an old VHS player that still works and pop it in. What I saw has me freaked the FCK out. The film starts rolling in a huge, cavernous space that might have been the basement of one of the many mansions in the old section of town. There were big pillars set up on either side of a long, crimson-colored carpet. The camera panned the carpet and then settled on a huge marble altar, topped by an intricate carving, unlike anything I have ever seen in a church. Instead of Christ or a cross, the altar was capped by a huge marble statue of a naked man. On his head was a crown of garlands like a Greek god. The altar was beautiful, but as I watched the tape, I ever so faintly remembered being 8 years old and staring down that long, red carpet and seeing the altar and being seized by a sense of dread and incipient pure panic. I sat and tried to place the memory, whether it was before or after I had my tonsils out, but I just couldn't remember it properly. The camera panned back and landed on me. I was apparently the star of the show. I stood there awkwardly dressed in weird white robes. It reminded me of some half-memories that popped up from time to time about being clad in white robes, but I had always dismissed that as something that happened in the hospital. The camera looked me up and down, and what it showed was a confused, fat, blubbering little boy I could hardly recognize as myself. I was standing between 2 tall men, and there were tears running down my cheek, and I was heaving great bawling sobs. I was picking my nose frantically, and I suddenly remembered that when I was a little kid, I used to pick my nose compulsively when I was nervous. The nose picking was back before I have clear memories. Before I got popular, the tall man on my left was wearing one of those Greek tragic muse masks that was white as snow, and the tall man on my right was wearing a blood-red comic muse mask. I was looking them up and down. I must have been looking desperately for some hint of tenderness or compassion, but they were just two tall men, standing rigid and wearing masks and facing straight ahead. The camera panned back to the altar. Another very tall man walked into frame up to the altar, and he was dressed in crimson robes and a shockingly lifelike goat head mask. The man had a long dagger in his hand that looked wicked even by the faint light of the tallow candles burning on the altar. As I sat in a chair and watched the goat-headed man on the crackling VHS tape, even though I'm now a physically intimidating 18-year-old alpha bro, I realized I had involuntarily begun to suck my thumb and pick at my nose again, disgusted. I forced myself to grab the sides of the chair I was sitting in and continue watching the tape. The man spoke lisped really through his mask. This year the Crandall family has been gracious enough to offer their son, Julius, for the Orphic ritual. May the ritual be a success, and may it bring another year of peace and prosperity to the town, and a lifetime of prosperity and popularity to the Crandalls and to their son. Please bring Julius down. The sound quality was horrible. Every other syllable was punctuated by crackles and hisses, and I had to rewind the tape several times to make it all out. I felt close to an emotional edge as the tape continued to play. I sat grasping the sides of the chair I was sitting on so hard my knuckles were turning white, and the panic and terror were washing over me in vast and terrible waves. It was all I could do to keep myself together. I wanted to turn the tape off and pretend I had never found it, but I couldn't. I watched myself being LED down the carpet toward the goat-headed man with the knife. I watched as I tried to turn around and run away, but four strong hands held me fast and guided me, roughly I now remember, toward the altar. The camera zoomed out again, and when it zoomed back in I was standing at the altar, knees knocking, and I was squirming against the two tall men who held me in place, while the man with the dagger chanted something. The sound quality on the tape was horrible, and I couldn't make out a word of what he was saying. The priest picked up a wooden chalice and turned to face the statue on the altar. He held the chalice up toward the statue's lips. Once he had touched the lips with the chalice, he turned around and guided the chalice toward my own trembling lips as the two strong men held me fast. I remember now that I was still pants-pissing scared, but that I also craved whatever was in the chalice. Sitting in my chair, tears running down my cheek, I could now see this scene as clearly as I could see Geneva smile at me in my hospital bed. The chalice touched my lips and the men made me drink, and my body went limp immediately. I crumpled up on the floor, and the three men heaved me up onto the altar and lay me spread on the altar beneath the statue. The two men turned to face the congregation. The camera panned the seats for the first time, and I could see a sea of people wearing myriad masks that ranged from the angels to wolves or devils. The camera focused again on the priest, who was standing over my body, dagger in hand, chanting again. My body bled out on the altar and convulsed one last time. And then I saw the same two men who had LED me up the carpet come back into frame, this time carrying a child-sized box that I instantly realized was a coffin. The priest in the goat mask chanted another weird blessing over my body. The arterial blood had quit squirting in its great red geyser. Now there was only the gentle, almost soothing trickle of lazy black blood falling down from my throat, falling onto the ground in front of the altar and great globs. The two men closed the lid on the ceremonial casket. "It is done," the priest said loudly. "Now our sacrificial victim is to be buried. And should the gods will it, he shall rise rejuvenated and bring prosperity to us all." For another year the tape went black. I could not bring myself to rewind it. I cannot mention it to my parents or to anyone. I have a strange feeling I wouldn't be safe. I balled my fists up and sobbed in bewilderment and confusion and panicked. I ran my hands, as I often do whenever I'm nervous, across the only blemish I really have, an admittedly very large and jagged scar on my throat. That was when I heard the basement door open.